Now that you have an overview of how CSS works, let's put what we're learning into practice. We'll begin by looking at some of the most commonly used CSS properties and their associated values. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that CSS is a special kind of language that consists of rules. Each rule must have a selector and a declaration block, and it looks like this. The selector will select the HTML element that you want to style, and the declaration block contains one or more declarations that are separated by a semicolon. A declaration consists of a property name and a value, and these are separated by a colon. CSS is extremely extensive, and there are many things that we can do with it. We'll be starting off with a simple overview. So let's start by looking at some of the basic functions of CSS. We will begin by focusing on some of the most used properties. These include text, colors, spacing, which has to do with the box model, borders, background, and size. CSS text styling is how we control how words look on a web page. The most common text properties are color, which changes the text color, font size, which controls how large or small the text is, font family, which changes the font or typeface, font weight, which makes text normal, bold, etc., text align, which moves text left, center, or right, line height, which adds spacing between lines, letter spacing, which adds space between letters, text transform, which changes text to uppercase or lowercase, text decoration, which adds or removes underlines, and font style, which makes text appear as italic or normal. Let's jump into an actual web page and see how this works. I've already gone ahead and created a basic HTML document. Here's the code that we'll begin with. As you can see, I have a head section, which contains our meta tag, a title tag, and a link. However, I have not linked any CSS to this file. The HTML itself consists of a header with an H1 and an H2, main, which contains an article with an H3, a paragraph, an unordered list, and two more paragraphs. And then finally, we have a footer. This is the resulting web page in the browser. Let's go ahead and create our external CSS. I'll do this by creating a new file in my CSS folder. We're going to call this styles01.css. And then I need to link the style file. So in my HTML file, I'll come to the href attribute of the link element, and we'll go ahead and set up the appropriate path. Notice that currently this page is inside the pages folder. So I need to go up one level, which consists of writing .. Then I'll write CSS, which takes me into the CSS folder, .. and then I'll find the file that I want to link to. In this case, it's going to be styles01.css. Now that the file is linked, I can begin to write my CSS in this external file sheet. This will allow me to go ahead and create CSS that I want to use on my document. Let's start off by adding a font family to our web page. Choosing the right font has a huge impact on how users will experience a website. We have a property called font family that allows us to set the font of the text. I'll go ahead and apply this to the body element. That means everything that exists within the body will be affected by this rule. We'll type the property of font family, and then we'll just go ahead and specify that we want this to be Arial. I'm going to save my CSS file, and if we refresh in the browser, you can see how the text has now changed to the Arial font family. Typically, when we declare font families, we never just use one font family. We usually create something called a font stack. A font stack is where we will specify multiple font families. It's like you're specifying your first, your second, your third choice. You don't have to add a specified number of choices, but it's a good idea to at least do 2 or 3. So I'm going to specify that Arial is my first choice, Verdana is my second choice, and my final option is just going to resolve to be a default sans serif font. This will go ahead and load whatever font is defined as the user's default font on their operating system. You always want to make the default font the last in the series. That way, in case your first choice is not available and your second choice is not available, your third choice will kick in. If we save our CSS and we refresh our page, you're going to see this font is available and it's being loaded on the page. If, however, I change the name to like Arial 1 or something that doesn't exist, and we save our CSS and refresh the page, you're going to see that the font family changes slightly. What's happening now is it's trying to load Arial 1, it doesn't find it, so then it moves on to Verdana, our second choice, and it loads that. If Verdana wasn't available, it would just default to whatever our operating system's default sans serif font would be. So it is best practice to use a font stack like this. It's also worth mentioning that if you use a font family that is more than one word, let's say we use brush script MT, you will need to encapsulate the name of that font inside of quotes. You don't need to quote single word font families, but anything that is more than one word needs to be encapsulated inside of quotes. If I refresh now, you can see it loads this font. I would like to mention that this is not a great font, especially for body copy, because the font is very difficult to read. I'll go ahead and change this back to Arial, which will, of course, set the font family back to our first choice. I also want to mention that not all browsers support all of the fonts. This list of fonts should be fonts that are available on most operating systems, but it is common practice to set multiple fonts in case one of these is not available. Now that I have the font family set on the body, I'm going to use a more specific selector, and we're going to style the font family within our header. What I'll do now is I'll specify header, and then we're going to set font family, and this time we're going to use a serif font. We'll use the font family of Georgia, and if that is not available, I'll just request the default serif font to display. If we refresh now, you'll notice font has been updated to Georgia, while the rest of the text remains as Arial. This is an example of specificity where we're using a more specific selector to overwrite the default or a less specific selector. Now let's get even more specific, and we're going to target the H1 that is within the header. I will use a selector of header space H1. This means find any H1 elements that are descendants of header. In this case, I only have this one block of text, but if I did have other H1s that met that criteria, they would be styled in the same way. What we're going to do here is we're going to change the color of the font. In order to change font color, you will use the color property. We will simply be using a keyword color, so I'm going to specify that the header H1 be set to teal. If I save now and we refresh, you can see that the change has occurred. We'll go ahead and set some other font properties on our header. We're going to use a font size, and we'll set the font size to be 40 pixels. We're also going to change the font weight. Font weight is how you can make something bold or not bold. You can use keyword selectors such as normal or bold, and in some cases you may have lighter or bolder. You also have these numeric values. These only pertain to typefaces that support the numeric values. For our purposes here, we're simply going to use the keyword, and I'm going to set the font weight to normal. The reason why I'm choosing normal is if I make the font weight bold, it's not going to have any impact on headings. Headings are bold by default. So when we set the font weight to normal, it's going to override that default font weight so it displays as a normal weight. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use text transform. This will allow us to transform the way that the text is displayed. You can change your text to be uppercase, lowercase, or capitalize. If we use uppercase and we save, when I refresh the page, all of the text will become uppercase. Capitalize is simply going to make the first letter of every word uppercase, and then lowercase would make the text lowercase. In addition to this, I'm going to use letter spacing. This will allow me to space out the text. Since my text is uppercase, it looks a little tight, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of letter spacing, probably 2 pixels, which slightly separates the letters apart. Letter spacing is probably not something you'll use on a regular basis, but when you're dealing with headlines, it can be very helpful. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the alignment of the text in the header. We'll come back to our header selector and we're going to use text align center. Values you can pass on are left, which is the default alignment, center, or right. And when we do that, you can see that now the text inside the header is center aligned within my web page. Let's go ahead and move on and target the paragraphs. I will use a selector of P, and for our paragraphs, we're going to change the line height. Line height is how you can control the space between lines. The value that you pass on is one of the few instances in CSS where we don't specify the type of units. Line height is a ratio of the font size. So if I write something like 2, it's going to make the line height twice as big as the size of the paragraphs. Let's reduce that down to 1.6. And if we save our page, you can see that it's just given a little bit of additional spacing in the paragraphs, not quite as significant as when we had set that to 2. Another cool effect that you might want to add on text is the text shadow. I'll go ahead and add this on my H1. We'll specify a property of text shadow, and the text shadow property can take on 4 values. The first value is the horizontal offset. If I use a positive number, it's going to push the shadow to the right. Negative numbers will pull it to the left. The second value is the vertical offset. Again, if I use a positive value, it will push the shadow down, while negative numbers will pull the shadow up. The third value is the blur amount. This is the softness or the fuzziness of the shadow itself. And then the fourth value, which is optional, is the color. Right now, I'll just go ahead and leave the text shadow declaration without color to show you what happens. If we refresh our page, you can see that the text shadow shows up and matches the color of the element. The color is going to be inherited by the color of the text. If we want the color to be slightly different, we can just pass on an alternate color. So I'll specify gray, and now if I refresh, you can see I kind of get a gray drop shadow. These values are fun to experiment around with. You can add depth or make your text pop or even glow. This can sometimes help if your text is displaying on a busier background or just needs to stand out in some way. The next property that we're going to look at is going to be font style. I'm going to apply this to my H2 element. So I'll specify a selector of H2, and we're going to use a font style of italic. Font style is used to make text appear in style italic. This text now shows in an italic way. For the final text example that I want to share with you, I'm going to go ahead and create a link within my HTML. I'll go back to the HTML And we'll come to this third paragraph and we'll go ahead and create an anchor link. For the value, I'm just going to specify the hash, which is a null link, and then we'll just type the text a link. If we save and we refresh, you can see this is blue and underlined. This is the default way in which text appears. What we can do with CSS is we can remove the underline. So I'll go into my CSS file, I'm going to target my anchor link, and we're going to specify text decoration. If I want to remove the underline, I will simply say text decoration of none. If I refresh the page, you can see that now this is still a link, the color is still blue, but we've removed the underline. We can also do things like change the default color of links. So if I want my link to be orange, I'm going to go ahead and specify dark orange, and I'll save my page, and now you can see that the text appears as a different color. It's also worth mentioning that when you're setting the styles for inline text that appears like within a paragraph, it's usually best to practice to not remove the underline because users will typically look for the underline and identify that as a link. So let's get rid of the text decoration here. We'll leave the color as orange, but you can see that now the underline has returned. Now I'm going to go back to my H2 and let's go ahead and add text decoration. Another word of caution is that we typically don't want to underline text unless it is a link, so we typically wouldn't use a straight underline. But we do have quite a bit of additional text decoration values that we can add. Now, text decoration allows you to change things like underlines, strike-throughs, overlines, and we have some specialty values that allow us to do more customized type of styling. Typically, when we use text decoration, we'll want to specify underline first. From a usability standpoint, this appears to be a link. But if we combine this with some of the other text decoration fields, such as text decoration color, we can specify the color. Let's make this aquamarine. Then I'm going to go ahead and specify the text decoration style. And we have quite a bit of options here: dashed, dotted, double, none, solid, wavy, and then we have some other options. Let's go ahead and make this dashed. And then finally we have text decoration thickness, which is going to allow us to control how thick the line is. I'll just make this 4 pixels. If we save our page and refresh, you can now see I have a dashed line underneath my text. When you use text decoration, instead of declaring 4 separate declarations, we typically combine these into a shorthand method of applying the text decoration. This allows us to be more succinct with our code. So instead of writing this, I can simply specify text decoration and I can pass in all of these values. So we're going to say underline. This time we'll make it wavy, we'll make it red, and we'll make it 2 pixels. This rule comes after these other declarations, so it of course is going to overwrite them. But if I save my page and we refresh, you can see those new changes have kicked in. It is best practice to not leave a bunch of CSS rules that are being overwritten or you're no longer using. So I am going to select the text decoration that I first added and just delete those. And of course, our page is going to look exactly the same. So in this way, I've quickly shared with you some of the more common font and text related properties. The ones that you will get the most use out of are going to be font family, text align, font size, font weight. You might use text transform in some cases, possibly letter spacing, and text shadow and font style. I hope that you found this helpful and that you have some ideas for how you can transform your web pages to make them more meaningful by being able to control how the text appears on your web page.